Hi, my name is Luyren, and here's a quick Stencyl tip. Know how the basic events work. I've seen a lot of users with the wrong understanding of some of the events you can include in your code, so I thought I'd explain a bit about them. Remember that all this information can be found in the Stencylpedia and the blocks guide, links in the description. But before we begin, an addendum to the previous video. I implied that you can only see the Preview Code tab for behaviors. While the Preview Code button only appears for behaviors, you can still see the hex code for actors and scene events by clicking the binocular icon. Now onto the video. The WhenCreated event executes only once when the actor is created, or when the scene is first loaded, in the case of scene behaviors or events. For actors placed in the scene designer, they also execute when the scene loads. Created events cannot be triggered again after the actor is created, and they execute even if the game is paused. The WhenDrawing event's execution is tied to the frames per second, or FPS. At 60 FPS, it executes 60 times per second. This event also cannot be paused. You can use any blocks here, but exclusive to this event are the blue blocks under the Drawing tab on the palette. One important detail is that drawing is global. That means that if you change the font, the space, or the color, for example, it affects all the drawings for all the behaviors or events, for all actors and scenes. To remedy that, whenever you need to use the drawing blocks, always set the space, the color, or the font depending on what you want to draw. The WhenUpdating event is a general-purpose event you will probably use most of the time. It executes 100 times per second, or every 0.01 seconds. An updating event on an actor is paused if the actor is set to can be paused, but it is not paused for scene behaviors. I've been mentioning pausing for a while, so what else is paused? Any timed events, and the do-after block, along with the do-every block. They will stop executing while the game is paused, so keep that in mind. Now, let's go over some common mistakes. Here's a lone do-after block in an update event. A lot of users think they can use that to stop the execution of the code for the duration of the do-after, but that's not the case. The stuff inside the do-after will be delayed, and that's it. Anything before or after will still execute. And from my explanation earlier, we can conclude that the do-after block is executing 100 times in 1 second, so you end up with hundreds of delayed code executions. If you want a delayed code to execute only once, you need to use a Boolean check. Use the not block to check if a Boolean is false, and set it to true just before the do-after block. Now with this, the do-after will only execute once. It can only execute again if you set the Boolean to false. You can do it somewhere else, or inside the do-after. Another common mistake is using the while block. It might make sense if you think, while this Boolean is true, I want to move my actor to the right. The problem is, that block is an indefinite loop. All loops must conclude before the rest of the code is executed, which means if you simply do this, the game will crash because it can't exit the loop. The Boolean is always true, so that loop continues indefinitely. What you mean to do in this example is use an if block. But if you do need to use the while loop, always put the exit condition inside of it. In this case, the exit condition is the Boolean becoming false. or use the exit loop block. This block's usage is very specific, so avoid using it unless you really need it. Here's an example of the while block being properly used. While the number attribute is greater than 0, it will decrement it by 1, and check if the remainder of that number divided by 10 equals 0. If it is, increment lives by 1. That's increasing the lives every time the number reaches a multiple of 10. You can see that regardless of the value of the number attribute, at some point due to being decremented in the loop, it will reach 0, exiting that loop. As a reminder, that while loop will happen in its entirety in 1/100th of a second. That's it for this quick tip. I'll cover some of the other events in a future video, and remember that you can always check the blocks guide and the Stencylpedia for specific information about them. I've also added links to my itch.io page, where you can get my stencil resources, and to my Twitter, where you can see updates on whatever I'm working on. Leave a comment if there are any stencil topics you want me to cover. I'm always open for suggestions. Thank you for watching.